Welcome to another edition of Ian Cameron's Football Frenzy. It is the CFL Grey Cup preview show, our final CFL edition of the show for this 2024 season. It's hard to believe we are here at the CFL Grey Cup championship game. Once again, CFL season flies by. Blink and it's over. Feels like June and week one was just, the other day. And yet here we are in the Grey Cup with the Toronto Argonauts taking on the Winnipeg Blue Bombers. We'll get to that in a moment. But back with us on the show, friend of the show, he's been on a bunch, Will Arndt, back in the house. Will, how are you, my friend? How are things?
Doing good. Always good to be here. Good to talk some CFL, good to talk some football, and get to share it with the world.
How about a life update from you? I mean, you're doing some training, obviously, still on a regular basis. You've done a little bit of television stuff with the docu-series that you've been working with, getting to put on that number 12 Tom Brady jersey. Talk about that whole experience. Pretty cool.
Yeah. So the show you're referencing, American Sports Stories, Aaron Hernandez. I worked on that show for the last year and a half as a sports coordinator. So having a hand in, recreating scenes that, the Patriots were known for, or telling the story and that whole in that whole saga. And then, I got to do some really cool stuff as a athlete, and I got to do some of the football stuff for Tom Brady. I got to do some of the stuff for the University of Florida on that show. I got to, do stuff for Drew Bledsoe, and it was just a really cool thing to be able to have my hands all over the show, whether it was coming up with names for play calls or helping to recreate scenes or recruiting guys that I played previously in pro ball with to kind of help those scenes come to life. So yeah, that was cool. We just had our last, today is Thursday. So on Tuesday was the season finale of the 10 episodes. So if any of you have missed it, it's on Hulu and you can check it out there.
There you go. I like the plug there. Check it out exactly on your Hulu streaming service there. Fun experience for sure. And how are things as far as the training side of things, keeping ready?
Yeah, everything's good. So I'm slated to go play in Alabama in the IFA. It's a new football league that's debuting. It's kind of like Sun Belt and Mexico merged, which will be fun. I'll be playing in the cold as much as I love playing in the cold, and I love my Canadian football. So I'll be down in Alabama next spring. Been staying sharp, and here in Connecticut at the moment, and just been stacking good days with that, and coaching the kids here in this local community, and been keeping up as we were talking off camera with my CFL ball, and keeping in touch with people in the league.
No doubt. That's what it is all about. Just keep on grinding and keep on working daily. And I'm working daily right now, as you well know. It's just absolutely insane. This is that month of the year. I always say to people every year, November's the busiest month of the year for me by far, because you've got hockey in full swing. You've got NFL and college football still right in the middle of the season. College basketball, which is only 350 teams to deal with. Not a big deal. Mm-hmm. 350 teams to deal with in college basketball. NBA as well. It is that sports, cataclysmic time of year when all the sports merge at once. And then there was a brief time when it was baseball too, when the World Series ended at the beginning of November. So it's just that time of year when it all happens all at once. The Yankees, yes. Unfortunately, the Yankees fall short to the LA Dodgers. But to be honest with you, Will, who was beating the LA Dodgers? They bought themselves a team good enough to win the World Series. It would have been an absolutely massive underachievement, believe it or not, for that team with how loaded they were to not win it. And the best team won.
Yeah. Yep. I mean, we got pretty big pocket, pretty deep pockets over here on this side. But yes. Yeah, they were definitely the better team.
They were. They sure. Who's going to be the better team, Will, on Sunday in the 111th CFL Grey Cup? Vancouver, BC Place Stadium, Toronto Argonauts, Winnipeg Blue Bombers. Winnipeg 9-point favorites. I mentioned that specifically because this was as high as 10.5 just a couple of days ago. So we've actually seen a little bit of movement toward the Toronto side, now at 9 with Winnipeg as chalk in this game. 51 the total. Total's actually been bet up as well in this game, from 49 up to 51 for this particular matchup. Obviously, the headline story of this Grey Cup is, well, there's multiple headline stories. For the Winnipeg Blue Bombers, it's a team that's now in their 5th straight Grey Cup game, 2-2 in the previous 4, wins in the first 2, both against my Ticats. Horrible. And then the last 2 losses to Toronto 2 years ago in a game where, oddly enough, Chad Kelly replaced an injured McLeod Bethel Thompson at the end of that game. And Toronto ended up beating Winnipeg. And then last year, the thriller right in my backyard. I was there in person for the Grey Cup at Tim Hortons Field, the Bombers and the Alouettes. It was a great game, back and forth. And Cody Fajardo and the Alouettes with the late fourth quarter game-winning touchdown drive. And it was a great drive to go down the field and win that Grey Cup against Winnipeg. So they're 2-2 in these 4 games. And you just know the Bombers, with the bad start this year, the tough taste in their mouth of losing in this game 2 years in a row. There is a huge difference, Will, between 2-3 versus 3-2 in these 5 Grey Cups for this core of the Winnipeg Blue Bombers that have been together all this time. You know, you lose this one as well. That's 3 in a row you've lost in the title game, and you're 2-3 overall during this 5-year stretch of getting to the Grey Cup. Where if you win this game, you've got the winning record 3-2, and it just feels like it's a huge difference. And everybody views this Bombers dynasty or this legacy. What's your legacy? And people always talk about that. It's overblown. It's overhyped. It's talked about too much. What's your legacy? What's your legacy? I'm going to be in the ground dead. I'm not going to hear what my legacy is. So I shouldn't care too much. And that's what I try to tell people. Don't worry about the legacy too much at the end of the day. Just go out there and be the best you can be on that particular day. And I'm sure Winnipeg is looking at this as an opportunity where let's just be great on Sunday. You know, knowing that we've lost the last 2, I think the focus is beyond off the charts, beyond off the charts right now for Winnipeg to not let it happen for a 3rd straight year, letting a Grey Cup chance slip through their fingers. I know they've already got the 2 that they've won, the majority of this core, but you want that 3rd now when you've been there 5 times. So you know they are absolutely chomping at the bit. But don't underestimate the intangibles and the emotions of the Toronto Argonauts. And yes, does the Chad Kelly leg injury leave a void? Does that make this a much harder task to beat the Winnipeg Blue? Of course. There's no question about that. But at the same point in time, they do turn to Nick Arbuckle, who has actually played well, Will, in the few times we've seen him lately. You know, he got the start while he didn't start the game. Cameron Dukes did against Edmonton. That final game didn't mean anything to Toronto, but nevertheless, he came in that game. He played a very good game. He made key key throws to get first downs down the stretch of the game against Montreal last week after Chad got injured. There was a good PI, the throw that he to the sideline that was drew a pass interference penalty, but he did the things he had to do, you know, and now he's going to get practice time all week. I'm sure a game plan installed by Ryan Dinwiddie, an offensive-minded head coach that is probably going to, you know, try to accentuate the skill set of Nick Arbuckle, and I have thoughts on what it should be. But then there's this Toronto attitude, and I saw it, Will, last week when they won that game and they hung on to beat Montreal in the East Final. Like, we really want to use this as a rallying cry emotionally as a group. You know, let's win one without our quarterback. You know, win one for. They love Chad Kelly. Say what you want about all the shit that went down with him personal, you know, in the incidents before, obviously with the female worker in the Argos organization. Say what you want about what happened there. The teammates think this guy's rehabilitated. He's been a great model teammate. You know, great in the, you know, great teammate since he's been back. And they have had glowing words to say. And regardless of what the outsider or what people not in that Argos fraternity think about Chad Kelly, the person, the Argo teammates really like him as a teammate and obviously are saying all the right things, rallying around this situation. And, you know, they're going to bring their best foot forward here in this game against the Winnipeg Blue Bombers. And then you factor in that as far as the Nick Arbuckle situation, what I like about Dinwiddie down the stretch, Will, is that he finally started running the ball more. And this was with Chad Kelly at quarterback. Because I think even with Kelly, they were asking him to be just pass heavy all the time. But we got Kadeem Carey going. Adeboboye, the backup running back, got touches. But there was a real concerted effort down the stretch. Let's balance the offense a little bit. Let's make sure we're running the football and committing to it. And I absolutely think that's going to be the case here in this game. Take pressure off Arbuckle, the screen game. is going to be important. There's no question, as well as the short to intermediate passes. Toronto's defense is not great statistically, Will. They give up yards, they give up big plays. They've had a lot of games, especially later in this season, where they gave up a lot of points, but they have become a defense that also has turned the ball over quite a bit, forced turnovers. And look at last week against Montreal as a perfect example. So that's going to be the key. The turnover margin is critical in any game. I think even the most simpleton of football fans and purists can say that. But I think in this game, it's even more imperative. You got to try to help out Nick in every possible way, whether that's running the ball, easy throws for him to complete, a defense that is able to force those turnovers and set up the offense maybe in good field position. You've got to find ways to help aid your quarterback in an ultimately a tough spot where he's all of a sudden thrust out of nowhere into starting the Grey Cup against the team that's been the best team in the CFL for the last 5 years. But there are pathways here for Toronto. And don't sleep on their great kick returner, because I know Winnipeg and Mike O'Shea they're not sleeping on him because he used to play for them, and he's still a damn good player, and that's Janarian Grant and what he has been able to do returning kicks this year for the Toronto Argonauts. And if he can bust one for a touchdown like he did last week against Montreal, or at least have one of those 40, 50-yard returns, and here's Nick Arbuckle in the Argos offense taking the field in plus territory, it's going to go a long way for the Argos here in this game. I'm going to get to my pick and the specifics on that in just a moment. But first, I'll throw it to you, Will. Just your overall thoughts, matchups, X's and O's, coaching, intangibles, wherever you want to go when it comes to this Grey Cup game. Have at it.
Yeah, it's one of those things now that we're here, if you would ask people, are you surprised with the matchup? It's like, oh man, again, but if you look back on earlier this year, the first, 8 weeks of the season, Toronto was by no means the team to beat. If anything, obviously Montreal being the hottest team in the league during that time, and Ottawa was off to a strong start. Toronto was kind of an afterthought. And then, Winnipeg, what did they start? 0-4 and then 2-6, and they've rattled off 9 out of their last 10. So, here we are. And, a salute and the tip of the cap to these organizations. Obviously, they're doing a lot of things well inside the building to keep getting them back to this point. And you touched on Ryan Dinwiddie, and I think he's going to, put together something where they're very competitive. We mentioned the spread earlier. In pro football, you have your marquee headliner guys, but they're all good football players. The margin is usually a lot smaller than you think. That doesn't mean that, Nick Arbuckle is the player that Chad Kelly is, but, Nick's going to be fine. I had a chance to coach and call plays for Nick in Ottawa in 2022. He'll be as prepared as you possibly can be. He's not
totally
going to be
forgot
scared of the
you got
moments.
that personal experience with him from Ottawa. That's
Yeah.
right.
Yep. So I know Nick very well in that dynamic, and he's gonna know what to do. And he's had a lot of starts. He's 31 years old. So there's no reason that he shouldn't, go out there and be competitive and give these guys a run. And Winnipeg's not a bunch of world beaters. I think if you asked people, is this the best Winnipeg team we've seen in the last 5 years? I don't think people would put this one at the top of the list. They're hot right now. But that said, obviously they're going to be a tough out, and as I've mentioned, they're the hot team. And as you were going through those thoughts that you so eloquently put together, I was thinking about Zach Collaros and his legacy, as you were talking about legacy. And I've heard for many years, having been around the CFL, about Warren Moon and 5 Grey Cups in a row. And I was like, wow, not for nothing, but Zach Collaros has been to 5 Grey Cups in a row, and what potentially his legacy could be with another win added to his resume. So, a lot to look at here, and I think we'll be poised for a good game. And, I think there's going to be a lot of points scored because of the fact that it is an indoor controlled environment. And let's get a little more into the picks and the details.
So I have been on a lot of Toronto overs the last, as far as the totals in their games, and been rewarded more often than not because they've been playing in these high scoring games. Chad Kelly in the offense has been great. The defense has struggled. That's been part of it as well. I was a little more hesitant early in the week about this game going over, and mostly because of the quarterback change for Toronto. But what some people have said, What I'm starting to hear that, simplify things and just make it a little easier on Nick. And from what you've just said, Nick's got confidence. Nick is going to come in here with confidence. He's not going to question or doubt his ability to step up in a spotlight and an environment like this for one game. Remember, he doesn't have to have a great season. He just has to have one game where he has a great showing. My concern is, and this is a stat that has been popular certainly in handicapping the NFL and college football over the years, and it's become a big handicapping tool even for me when evaluating and handicapping quarterbacks. The turnover worthy play stat has become really big. Turnover worthy plays where it's not an interception, but boy, you put that ball in traffic and you risked something bad happening. And just off and we don't have a stat to measure that with Nick Arbuckle, but what I can say is he's had a lot of those plays over the years, going back to even his first stop in the CFL. Hell, I even am old enough to remember, and the memory is sharp enough, thankfully, Will, to remember when he played in Georgia State in college football. And same thing. There'd be a lot of times when he'd force things and double coverage, and the ball would still go in that direction. And my concern is this Winnipeg secondary that he is up against. I don't know how much of the Bombers you got to see this year, but the secondary in particular, they have not allowed receivers to get free. They have not allowed receivers very often to get separation from their defensive backs, and they can line them up in that defensive backfield. Dietrich Nichols, Terrell Bonds, Brandon Alexander, they just got back from injury. Evan Holm has been amazing for them. That entire group in the secondary. How about Trey Ford? Everyone talks about Trey Ford this year. How about Tyrell Ford? How about his brother and the way he is playing in that secondary, locking things down for the Bombers? They have 5, not just good, they have 5 really strong players in that secondary across the field. And so if Nick Arbuckle is going to have some ball security issues again, and maybe if receivers aren't getting open, and that's going to be the job of DeMonte Coxey and Mackay Polk and a lot of these Argos receivers that they've relied on here this season to try to get free from coverage down the field. But what if that's not possible? Because it hasn't been very easy, and at times it hasn't been possible for the opposing receivers to get free from this Winnipeg blanket coverage secondary that they've had. If that happens, I'm worried about those forced throws where nothing's open. I don't want to take the sack. Maybe forget to throw it away, and there's that forced throw, and there's that interception when maybe you're in field goal range or you're moving the ball and you're in plus there. That's what I worry about the most for Nick Arbuckle in this game. Not so much that he's going to throw interceptions because it's all his doing. It's what the Winnipeg secondary might force him to do with coverage that throughout this hot stretch with Winnipeg turning their season around, Zach's going to get the credit. Brady Oliveira, the MOP candidate, is going to get the credit for running the football and how good the offense has been down the stretch. This secondary deserves as much credit as anything for the way Winnipeg's played down the stretch. Their ability to just not let you get free one-on-one down the field if you're an opposing receiver. It's been absolutely something else to watch. What do you think of that point?
Yeah, for sure. Going back to my own experience with Nick, there were certainly a lot of those, and there was a lot of good things, but there's a lot of moments where, as someone up in the box watching, I'm like, oh, what are we doing? Things that made you unsettled or uneasy at times. But shooters are going to shoot, and that's just a byproduct of who he is. And if he was bad, he wouldn't still be in the league. And so I expect that to be a catalyst, whichever way that does go, whether it's turnover or potential turnovers that they get away with. And that might be the deciding factor in the game, as you mentioned. And credit to that Winnipeg secondary. They've been a very strong group this year. But at the same time, Ryan Dinwiddie's a heck of a coach. And I think his fingerprints are going to be all over the game.
Yeah, there's no doubt. I wouldn't be surprised if we see some gadget plays, some trick plays. Something's going to be in that bag of tricks in the playbook for Toronto that Winnipeg's not expecting. 100%. There's going to be something busted out, something that is just strategically put into that playbook just for this game. And because you're playing probably such a great secondary, as I've talked about, You're going to have to try to gimmick things up on at least one occasion in this game and try to throw something at this Bombers team on defense that maybe they're not expecting. That's going to be something to watch for. And if you look at the Winnipeg defensive numbers, I'm talking about all the praise in the world for the secondary, but the run defense, oddly enough, hasn't been always great for Winnipeg. They've given up yards on the ground at times this year, which is why I think if you're Ryan Dinwiddie, and I'm hoping he does this because I'm liking Kadeem Carey a lot as far as a player prop standpoint in this game, whether it's over rushing yards in particular, over receiving yards. I think both running backs actually will have a good game because I think you can run on Toronto's defense a little bit as well. And we know no one's better equipped to do that than the best running back in the CFL for the last few years, and that's Brady Oliveira. So I think it's a good running back prop type of game, actually, because I think you will see Carey for Toronto get a lot of run. You don't want to put it all on Arbuckle's shoulders or his arm.
Sure.
You've got to balance the offense for him. Winnipeg is a little bit worse. The worst side of the ball for them defensively is against the run. They are elite against the pass, number one across the board in the majority of categories with pass defense, yards per play allowed, yards per pass attempt, passing yards per game allowed. Number one, Winnipeg. But the run defense was, I think, 5th or 6th in the league this year. They have given up some ground yards this year. So I think it's a Kadeem Carey spot here, and Toronto can, has committed to using Carey a lot more, especially in the playoff game against Ottawa in the East Final. We saw it, or in the East Semifinal. We saw it again against Montreal in the East Final. They didn't mind giving it to Carey. So I think just making sure that you commit to it, even if it's not working early in the game, because Winnipeg's not stupid either. On defense, they might think, well, you know what? They want to ease Arbuckle into the game. They're going to run it a lot, maybe crowd the line of scrimmage more. That's very possible. Winnipeg does that. But you got to commit to it. You can't just say, well, you know what? First couple drives of the game, Carey's picking up 1 or 2 yards. That's it. No more run game. Commit to it. And then eventually that will open things up as the game goes on. But I think in this game, with the fact, especially, Will, that Winnipeg's weaker part of their defense is stopping the run as opposed to against the pass, it's very important for Toronto to see Kadeem Carey be a very sizable part of the offensive game plan for them on Sunday.
Very much agree. I think they're going to lean on him early and often. And, not for nothing, for anyone that is skeptical of the matchup, I actually think that Toronto has the better roster in terms of talent. If you look at different positions across the board. So I think
a very talented roster. I will agree with that. Yes.
Yeah.
No argument.
Yep. So a lot of really good athletes. I even just their receivers and defensive line and Jake Ceresna and Wynton McManus. And I just think there's good players everywhere. And I think that's going to show up in a game like this. And all the more reason why I think this will be a little bit closer than what people might think. And
now we will get to that because I am with you. I actually took a piece of the Toronto Argonauts earlier this week, plus 10.5. Nice. I just thought it got to the point where it was just too much. I mean, we are talking about a game with Chad. If this game was with Chad Kelly at quarterback and it was Argos Bombers here in the Grey Cup, Toronto was going to be, I think, a 3.5, 4-point favorite, or Winnipeg was going to be a 3.5, 4-point favorite in this game. So we're talking, by the time that line moved all the way up early Monday to 10.5, that we're talking about a 6-7 point difference in the point spread. And now I know it's Chad Kelly to Nick Arbuckle. It is a downgrade, but you just said it, and I agree with you on it. The rest of take out the quarterbacks, take Zach off Winnipeg, take Nick/Chad Kelly off Toronto. What's the rest of the roster look like for these two teams? I think Toronto's got a hell of a lot of talent. But they're great on the O-line. The defensive line can get after it, especially look at how much better they got as far as pressure on the quarterback once they got Fuller and Arumalade back. He missed some time earlier in the season, and he came back and solidified that group. The defense was really struggling, especially when Wynton McManus, who can do it all. He can cover it against the run. He can drop back and intercept the ball against the pass. He is a great all-around linebacker for this team and one of the leaders on their defense. And without him, they were really struggling. And at least with him back, you're seeing them suddenly starting to take the ball away, forcing turnovers. bending but not breaking now, as opposed to giving up scores every time the team's deep in Toronto Argonaut territory. His presence on this defense matters. The talent here is big, and the receiving core too. I think Makai Polk, I see what he's done this year at receiver for the Argos, and part of me thinks, if he gets the right situation, he might get an NFL look, at some point. That's how impressed I've been, specifically with him, Makai Polk. He's got a lot of the ability potentially to be someone they can use down there. David Ungerer stepped up. DeMonte Coxey, of course, it goes without saying, has been huge for the Argos at receiver. They've definitely got weapons. There's a good kid out of just down the road from me, McMaster, is where he played his university football. Tommy Neild. Tommy Neild is someone that's had glimpses of being a solid receiver this year for this Argos team. So there is a lot of talent. And certainly Winnipeg has their share of it as well. There's no doubt. The O-line anchored by Stanley Bryant, an 8-time in a row CFL All-Star left tackle. I mean, that guy's been a stalwart for this Winnipeg team, anchoring that O-line. Goes without saying, the great receivers led by Kenny Lawler. Brady Oliveira has become the best running back in this league. Obviously, they've got other good receivers that have been here a while, that have developed that great chemistry and rapport with Zach Collaros. When you're talking about Nick Dembski and Drew Olatarski, what's been amazing too, Will, is they've missed one of their heart and soul receivers all year in Dalton Schoen. And yet for the Winnipeg Blue Bombers, they've been able to just keep on keeping on. And that offense has been able to start humming here second half, even without a key cog. That being said, don't underestimate that Toronto emotional angle here of this rally the troops, step up without your quarterback. It's an angle that works in sports. First NHL game without Austin Matthews, and the Toronto Maple Leafs win. First game without Deshaun Watson for the Cleveland Browns, and Jameis Winston has to start against the Baltimore Ravens. And guess what they do? They beat Baltimore. Cleveland, who's had a terrible year, they beat Baltimore. Don't underestimate that element. It's uncanny how a game without your star or your quarterback or whoever the case may be, one of your best players, usually in the football, it's the quarterback, and the team steps up collectively and finds a way to get it done, or at least be competitive, if not get the job done. So I'm agreeing with Will. I think at this point, I'm not saying, look, Nick Arbuckle has a disaster game. If the defense is not stopping Oliveira and Collaros goes off and Winnipeg's playing like they did against Saskatchewan last week on both sides of the ball, yeah, Winnipeg can win. Winnipeg can win by double digits, no doubt. They're very capable of it. But I think the value now in the point spread has shifted to Toronto. And I think when you just measure up these two rosters, and given the fact that I don't think Nick Arbuckle is going to be that complete, our hands are tied type of offense because he's there, not with the Dinwiddie and the brain trust that they've got on that side of the ball. I think there's reasons to think we've still got the chance for a competitive Grey Cup here on Sunday.
Yep, as always, agree with a lot of what you said, and I think Winnipeg. I've defended Toronto a lot in the last few minutes, but I think there's a lot to what you said earlier in the show about how Winnipeg's lost the last two Grey Cups in a row. And I think they will be laser focused this week. They're also very familiar with what it feels like to play in this game, what it feels like to get ready, everything that comes along with playing in a Grey Cup. And, I in my CFL time in 2018, I got to be a part of a team that went to the Grey Cup, and it's a lot and it's different. And these guys have been there and they've done it and they've felt it. And they also have something to prove. And I think they will have a convincing win. I don't think blowout by any means, but I think they will win comfortably. And, if I had to do anything with the line here, I would say, I still think it's a little bit too much, but I like Winnipeg to get the job done in a fairly comfortable manner.
There you go. Yeah, I predicted on a lot of the shows I've been. Now I think I may want to change I said 27-20 Winnipeg, and I do think Winnipeg's going to win probably, but I'm going to think Toronto still got enough to keep it within one score. Let's not underestimate too that Dinwiddie versus O'Shea this year, Toronto versus Winnipeg. Toronto won both games in the regular season. Now, different circumstances, I get it, both times, but there was one of those games in Toronto where Chad Kelly didn't play. I know he played the second game, but the first game he didn't. Toronto still won. And it was a competitive down-to-the-wire game. And Winnipeg not once gained separation from Toronto in that game. So that's why I think there's still reasons to think Toronto can compete in this game. And I think certainly now with the inflation in the point spread and potential overreaction. I say potential overreaction because we could see Zach go nuts. We could see the defense shut down the Argos and it ends up being 31-10 Winnipeg. It could happen. But I'm just saying the potential overreaction to this Chad Kelly to Nick Arbuckle quarterback change still has me looking at Toronto. And I will say this with the over. The one thing that probably benefits you if you like the over, even though I'm still on the fence with it, it's indoors, no weather issues, fast track. Winnipeg's offense playing as good as they have all year. Toronto's defense still shaky, although forcing turnovers is going to be the key too. Nothing's worse for an over than, and I've been there on the wrong side of it, Will, where you've got this great drive, but you take 8 minutes off the clock. You're down inside the 10 and you turn it over. And there you go, no points and 8 minutes off the clock. It's just an overkiller when that happens. And maybe we see that here in this game, but there's also a lot of pathways to this game going over because Toronto's defense is shaky. Winnipeg's offense, the pass game and the run game balance has been firing on all cylinders. And Toronto, even with Arbuckle, you got a good offensive-minded head coach to get him in the best position to succeed in this game against a Winnipeg defense that, yes, the secondary is great, but maybe there's going to be some tricks in that, some changes in that playbook, something that maybe Winnipeg is not expecting that can lead to Toronto points. And then you have the X factor of the kicking game and special teams. You have good kick returners on both sides. Lucky Whitehead for Winnipeg. And, of course, Janarian Grant, as we talked about for Toronto, is a threat to go to the house every time he touches the football on a kick return, or at the very least set up Toronto in good field position. And how about the kickers? Liram Hajrullahu for the Argos and Sergio Castillo for Winnipeg. These are two guys that have had incredible seasons. Consistent. Both are big leg kickers. Both of them are capable of long distance field goal makes. Liram Hajrullahu is usually very reliable from 50 plus. And I don't know if there's any kickers that have had a better season this year from 50 plus than Sergio Castillo. I mean, he's got the magic leg this year. I mean, he is hitting 60-yarders, 62-yarders, and Mike O'Shea doesn't hesitate. This year, as soon as they get to like the 50-yard line, if they get stopped and it's third down, here comes Castillo from 57 or Castillo from 62 yards if they're just inside midfield. He has not hesitated, Mike O'Shea, to give him. And plus, again, indoors at BC Place Stadium, there won't be any wind issues to worry about in the kicking game. So just not having to get far, Will, with these two kickers in particular to get into field goal range, that certainly helps anyone on the over in this game, doesn't it?
Yes, sir. Last thing I'll say is I'll give you guys a score. I'm going to say 31 Winnipeg, Toronto 23.
There you go, 54 points, and Toronto just slips inside the number. But that's I'm just trying to look at the latest injury reports as far as major injuries. Yeah. Like, obviously, we know for Winnipeg, Dalton Schoen's been out all year, but that hasn't changed. It's been that way for a very long time. Looks like for the Toronto Argonauts, there's nothing really significant right now as far as their injury situation, other than, of course, Chad Kelly. It goes without saying. But, for Winnipeg, it's Drew Wolodarski and Nick Dembski did not practice on Wednesday. Doesn't mean they're not going to play. And remember, this is the Grey Cup. I remember last year, there were guys that did not practice, and they were on the injury report, and they've been nursing something, and we thought, whoa, look out. Is their status in jeopardy maybe? Well, it's the Grey Cup. They still found a way to get on the field and play. Right. It wouldn't shock me if both of them are available, quite honestly, on Sunday. I think they're fine. It's just they're being caught. Nicks and bumps and bruises and nicks is what they're dealing with right now at this time of year. I'm sure everyone is. They play 18 regular season games in the CFL and a couple of playoff games. Did you feel it at the end of a long CFL season, those bumps and bruises? I mean, it is a long-ass season here in this
Holy
league.
Smokes. Yeah, man. I mean, especially like when you're coming out of college, which I went to a Grey Cup 2 years after coming out of college. We're used to playing 9-10 games. We're playing 18-game regular season, 3 postseason games, preseason, so 21-plus weeks of football. It's a long season, but for the most part, both these teams relatively in pretty good shape.
No doubt. Well, you know what? Now that we've talked about it for almost 30 minutes here, this Grey Cup game, I'm more excited about it now. For a guy that hates the Argos and is fucking sick of the Bombers, now 5 years in a row in the Grey Cup. And like I said, I'll be into it when it. Well, who's kidding? I love CFL football. It's why I'm a Ticat season ticket holder. I love this league. I'll be into the game when it's going on. That being said, I probably might put it on ice till that Chiefs-Bills game is over on Sunday, because that game is going to be something else coming up. And it's why we're going to go right into some NFL before we wrap things up here with Will. We're not going to go through. If you want my opinion on the entire NFL card, that's for the NFL Football Frenzy show with my regular guest, former college and pro quarterback Philip Nelson. Joins me every single week on the Football Frenzy NFL version. We'll go through every game in depth from a betting perspective. But with Will, we're just going to talk the marquee games here for Sunday. There are a handful of them that are very good, starting with Thursday night, Washington Commanders, Philadelphia Eagles. Eagles 4-point home favorites, 49 the total in this game. My thoughts are going to be saved for the NFL Football Frenzy show with Philip Nelson for time purposes. So this is the Will Arndt show for the remainder of the Football Frenzy. This is all about you, my friend. Now's your chance to be a star right here in front of our very eyes. What do you think for Thursday night, this battle for first in the NFC East, Washington, Philly?
All right. Well, I will preface by saying I'm going to follow my KISS rule. Keep it simple, stupid. All right. So I'm going to keep it clean and easy for the viewers. If you remember back when I was on the show a couple months ago, do you remember who one of my Super Bowl picks was?
Must have been the Eagles.
And it was the Eagles. So I'm not surprised. They've kind of got it going a little bit. I don't love their head coach, but I do love a lot of the different things that they have as a team. So they're starting to pick it up. And I think at home on a short week with a veteran quarterback versus a rookie quarterback, everyone knows going to Philly is no easy task. The people there are not very nice. And I think Philly will get a win tonight. And, I think, don't wish it on them, but I think it's going to become evident that they have a rookie quarterback in Washington and some of the growing pains that
with bruised ribs too. Bruised ribs too.
Yep. So I like Philly tonight. I think it's a heck of a matchup and a heck of a game. But I think Saquon Barkley and I think Jalen Hurts is settling in, and the team's kind of finding its groove, and they got great playmakers. And when you have these playmakers, it becomes really easy to play against on a scheme standpoint, and you can run the ball now. So I like what Philly's got going on. I expect them to get it done tonight.
Green Bay, Chicago. This is on Sunday, of course. Packers 5-point road favorites, 40.5 the total. What's wrong with Chicago? What's happened to this offense the last couple of weeks? The offensive line's been pathetic all year, and it doesn't help that they are injury riddled along the offensive line too. I read a stat: 11 different offensive linemen have had 20 snaps this year for the Chicago Bears. 11. That is an incredible number, and they've got, I think, upwards of 3 or 4 starters. By the way, they might have 4 starters that were projected to be starting offensive linemen out for this game, the Chicago Bears, and that's having an impact. It's not just the play calling, and I know they fired Shane Waldron, and a lot of times I like to see an uptick in the offense after a OC change. Sometimes you see that, but this O-line is struggling. Even the receivers, talk about failing to gain separation against Winnipeg's secondary. Bears receivers are struggling to gain separation right now against opposing Dunze and DJ Moore and Keenan Allen even. I mean, they're having some issues right now. Chicago, big time on offense. So tough spot. They're struggling. Green Bay's coming off a bye, and they lost in that quagmire against Detroit in the game before the bye. What do you think here, Packers, Bears?
Yeah, as a Vikings fan, I hope they both lose. But I think back on my time of when you lose a coordinator and a play caller. It's a lot to get over midseason. And with a rookie quarterback, you can't exactly lean on his experience and expertise and the things that he wants to do, where you could if you had a veteran, 10-year NFL vet. So I think there's a lot to overcome here. I think Chicago's got some good things in place, but I just don't think that this is the week. I remember, and then what I would expect from this game is Chicago has some different looking stuff early, maybe an early score, but then I think that stuff fizzles out. I experienced it as a player when we had a coordinator fired midseason. First game, hot start, and then it kind of fizzles out because you don't have the answers once you get through those calls that you like, or the play caller doesn't have the experience of what happens when the defense kind of counters what you're doing. And then the same thing, that same dynamic goes for the quarterback here. And, Green Bay's a good team, and, I expect them to take care of business in this matchup.
Yeah, I'm with you there. All right, this is a great one. Another first place showdown for a division in the AFC North. Baltimore and Pittsburgh, forever rivals they are. It's one of the great rivalries in the NFL. Baltimore 3-point road favorites, 49 the total here in this game. Look, the Russell Wilson experience has been okay so far, believe it or not, for the Steelers. But it's not just been all on Russell, obviously. He's been good enough, but they got the great run game. The defense has been absolutely incredible for the Pittsburgh Steelers, but they're up against probably one of the best offenses they've played all year, Baltimore, but also an offense, Baltimore, or defense, Baltimore, that has not been anywhere close to what it's been in years past. Great game. Top two teams in the division. What do you think here, Ravens, Steelers?
Yeah, boy, what a treat we got as fans with a couple of these matchups this weekend. This one's awesome. I hope it's very reminiscent of AFC North football, where it's physical and it's chippy, and the teams in division that see Lamar Jackson tend to play him and keep him bottled up just a little bit more than the rest of the league. Probably just from understanding a little bit of what works, because I haven't seen him just a little bit more. I can't help but root for Mr. Unlimited, Steelers country, Les Weld. I'm rooting for them, but I think what I've seen from Lamar Jackson this year, just his patience, but he still has the young twitchiness and athleticism. I just think he's such a dynamic player right now that's really settling into the prime of his career. I think ultimately he's going to be too much for them to handle, and he's surrounded with a really strong supporting cast. But this should be a treat for all of us, and probably a very tightly contested game.
I would agree. It's going to be a close one. It's hard to lay more than a field goal in this rivalry. And the Steelers, a lot of trends with them as a home dog, but now it's 3. It's tough. It's right where it should be. But it should be a great game. There's no question. If you look at Baltimore's defensive struggles, plus some of the injuries they're dealing with on defense, Kyle Hamilton, is he going to play? What a huge loss that is huge for them. In that secondary, no question. And then, of course, you talk about the Pittsburgh team. They actually have Alex Highsmith left the game due to injury. One of their top two, him and TJ Watt, they're a package deal pass rushing for this Pittsburgh team. No telling if he'll play either for this one as of right now. All right, Seattle, San Francisco. This is in the late window, 4 p.m. Eastern on Sunday. This is a good one, too. San Francisco, 6.5-point home favorites. The total 48. That was one of those games they could have won by blowout fashion against Tampa, but missed kicks, red zone issues on offense, but they did control that game. It was outgained Tampa by over 200 yards, and yet they needed a last-second field goal to win. Seattle kind of struggling the last few weeks. Can they get it back on track? Big division game here in the NFC West. Will, what do you think here, Seattle, San Francisco?
Yeah, I was reading something earlier. If history is any tell, I believe it was the last 3 or 4 years that San Francisco has really actually started with about the same record of that 4-5, 500 type of team, slow start. And then right about this time of year, they start to turn it on. They usually figure out their identity or get healthy. And, I think it's perfect timing for them to start to roll with getting Christian McCaffrey back. And I expect them to start that same trend that they've shown in the past. So Niners are going to roll.
Niners roll, and I'm leaning in that direction as well. All right, Kansas City Chiefs. But need I say more? Kansas City Chiefs, Buffalo Bills. Patrick Mahomes versus Josh Allen. This is the reason why I'm not watching the Grey Cup until this game ends. This game right here. We've got the Bills 2.5-point home favorites, 46 the total. I have been the one time I went against, and I know Kansas City and Mahomes have been money in the bank as an underdog, and they're undefeated. They keep finding ways to win. That there's a big horseshoe up their ass, though. Let's be honest. Like, they should have lost last week against Denver. Yep. Are you shitting me? Blocked field goal, last play of the game, and somehow you stay undefeated. That being said, the numbers for Mahomes as an underdog are incredible. And the one time I went against him when he was an underdog earlier this year at San Francisco, and the Chiefs went into the San Francisco and beat the 49ers in that game. So I can't do it. I cannot do it. Cannot say, yeah, let's bet against the best team, the best quarterback in the NFL as an underdog with the track record he's had. That being said, I do feel they're vulnerable here.
Yeah.
And if they're going to lose one, tough place to play. Buffalo's rolling right now, playing some excellent football, dominated Indianapolis last week, beat Miami the week before. They are really revving things up, Buffalo, with really on both sides of the ball. Great game. Unbelievable game. It's such a big game, Will, that CBS is sending their pregame studio people to Buffalo to do the pregame show from there. from Highmark Stadium. Tells you how big this game is. What do you think here? Chiefs Bills one more time.
Again, another one of those games where we're just very lucky for the matchup. I am with you. If I were a bettor, I would not want to put money against Patrick Mahomes and the Chiefs and what they've been able to do with manufacturing wins in a variety of different ways. That said, it does kind of feel like this is Buffalo's turn. It feels like it's time. Chiefs undefeated, Buffalo at home. They're hot. That said, I will say it's probably going to be whoever has the ball last. Yeah, I think back to 2021, I believe it was, in that AFC divisional round game where like Mahomes went down with 13 seconds left and Josh Allen had just put together what we thought was a game-winning drive. I think it'll be something like that where whoever has the ball last is probably going to win this game. I expect it to be a lot of fun for us to watch, but I would not want to touch it.
All right, we got 2 primetime games left to wrap things up. Cincinnati Bengals, LA Chargers. Chargers 1.5-point home favorites, 47.5 the total. I keep being impressed with their defense. The Chargers, week in and week out, they're playing great on that side of the ball. The pass rush is getting home with Joey Bosa and company. The secondary is playing better each week. I'm impressed. They've done a good job against the run. They're running the football themselves, controlling the clock as well, time of possession. And Herbert is steadily getting healthier and better off that ankle injury that was bothering him earlier in the season. He keeps playing better and better. The Bengals, look, we think they're better than their record is right now, but they just keep finding ways to lose. And that defense is not playing at the level the Chargers defense is right now. So I got to lean Chargers here. What do you think for Sunday night?
I agree, pal. I find myself rooting for the Bengals because they're better than what their record shows, and they're playing every team. They played some good teams. They played them all tough. Yep. They're absolutely worthy of being in contention when you talk about the end of the year in the playoffs. But this seems like a linchpin game for them. If they lose this, they're done. So they gotta have it, and I think they probably know that inside the building. That said, this team looks a lot like a Jim Harbaugh coach team. With how they're running the ball, you listen to the mics up. He loves what Justin Herbert is doing. Defense is playing well, as you alluded to. So I think the Chargers at home, it'll be another one of those games where you're like you're pulling for the Bengals to figure it out, and they'll probably lose another close game. Burrow will probably play well. Jamar Chase will probably have another great day of production, but it just doesn't seem to be their year as much as they really need this one. I like the Chargers.
How about the 2 Baltimore games in particular? 38 and 34 points they score in the 2 games against Baltimore. They lose both games. Can you believe that? I mean, boy, if you're Burrow, you can't believe it, how much lack of support, particularly from that defense. All right, and then on Monday Night Football to wrap up NFL Week 11, Houston-Dallas, Battle of Texas. Houston Texans, 7-point road favorites, 42. To me, this is lay it or don't play it. Dallas is really having a tough time. Whether it's Cooper Rush, whether it's Trey Lance, their offensive line stinks. And they have one great receiver, CeeDee Lamb, and I don't even think he's 100% right now. I think he's playing through something. Defense can't get off the field. This should be a Joe Mixon game where he terrorizes this horrible run defense. And even though the Texans have been struggling to win by margin, this could be the week they do it, especially coming off just that heartbreaking loss and that collapse in the second half that's not so much a collapse by Houston. That's just a phenomenal Detroit Lions team finding a way to come back in that game. This is lay it with Houston or don't play it for me. What do you think for Monday night?
Well, again, I agree. No matter how you want to slice that loss for Houston last week, incredibly frustrating. And I think this is one of those games where they're going to lay it on the Cowboys. I think the Cowboys are a team that it's on the verge of all falling apart right now. A lot of noise inside the building, a lot of words that are pretty questionable from players coming out. And I think this might be the game where it all starts to fall apart and it becomes reality that the Cowboys season is not really something of value anymore. So I'd like Houston to roll here.
Yeah, for me, that's the way I feel. Yeah, it's Houston or nothing for me in that game. There we have it. Will, awesome to reconnect. Good to have you back here on Ian Cameron's Football Frenzy. But we got to wrap up with a best bet for the CFL Grey Cup. If you had to pick one, Will, what would you go with?
You convinced me while we were on the show that I think there's going to be a lot of points scored in this So I like the over. It's 54, I believe. I think kickers got big legs. You're
51. We'll give
indoors.
you a
You're not
better number.
battling.
51. Yeah.
51. All right, right. Now 54 was my number. So I like the over. I think the kickers are great. I think the wind is not an issue. Weather's not an issue. I think you got a capable quarterback and good special teams. I think Zach Caleros is going to hoop at some point. And, you got great coordinators on both sides. So I think a lot of points are going to get scored in the Grey Cup. And I think it'll be ultimately a very fun, entertaining game to watch. And I will be dialed in for how much I love my CFL.
Yes, you and I both. We both love our CFL. There's no question. There you go. Toronto, Winnipeg over 51. CFL Grey Cup best bet for Will Arndt. My best bet, well, don't tell me I do hate the Argos. I do. But I love my bank account more. I love my sports betting bankroll more. And I think Toronto can still keep this competitive. I will take the +9 with the Toronto Argonauts here for best bet. Like I said, I think Arbuckle is a concern against that secondary, yes, but I think they're going to put him in a position to succeed, rely on forcing turnovers, rely on the good kick returner we have, Grant, some tricks in the playbook to help him out. And I think Toronto has that emotional bent as well in this game. Let's get this done for Chad Kelly. I think it's a close Grey Cup. And look at Winnipeg's last few Grey Cups as well. Look at the margins. The Hamilton win was in overtime by 8. The game against Toronto down to the wire 2 years ago. Last year, Montreal down to the wire, was one-score game. They got to prove it to me they can win by margin, even with Toronto playing with a backup quarterback. So, yeah, I'm going to go Toronto +9 for my CFL, a Grey Cup best bet. Great stuff, Will. Anything you want to say before we wrap it up?
No, man. You are the best. Thank you guys for tuning in. Ian does his homework. He's grinding. More importantly, he's a great dude, and I always love getting a chance to talk football with you and all you good folks out there.
We appreciate it. Yeah, we appreciate you. Hit the like button, everyone watching. Appreciate it very much. Will, we wish you all the best moving forward. We'll definitely get you on again at some point for sure. There you have it, folks. Will Arndt back on the show. Appreciate him joining us. For Will Arndt, I'm Ian Cameron. This has been another edition of Ian Cameron's Football Frenzy. Enjoy the CFL Grey Cup, and we'll see you next time right here on Ian Cameron's Football Frenzy.